Another video on props. I like the factory one. It's easy to get off, easy to put on. That's not so. You're gonna need a big bar for that one. So I'm gonna talk about degrees and go to basics. So when they talk about a 155 housing and they say 1115, exactly what it is on a 87 mil. And then they'll talk about a 13, 15, 18. The Solus 1319 is not actually a 1319, it's a 1219. You can measure them, and that makes it really hard to push. If it was a 13, 18, it'd be a lot easier. And you're thinking, oh yeah, here we go. This sounds like garbage. For my testing alone, I'll tell you what happens. The 13 edge doesn't compress as much into the nozzle. The 11 does. It compresses like a fine thread. You can torque a fine thread up tighter than a coarse thread. What actually happens is trying to compress, because of the angle, water's coming back out, and the tail edge does the compressing. So these props are pretty much identical, but they behave differently. You can put a 85 millimeter nozzle on here. No way in the world will you push this with a basic modified engine. You can put an 85 millimeter on this one, and you're thinking, no way, this is not even sounding right. Well, that's because the Solus, again, going back to it, is only a 12-18, which makes it harder to compress. It compresses here more, and you're compressing again more. If you ran a 13-15 propeller, you possibly would be able to turn an 85 millimeter nozzle. I believe you would, because you're actually, but you'd have to increase the rear then, because whatever compresses here multiplies out here. So if you don't compress here, you got to multiply it here. That sort of makes sense. I find that these don't have mid-range at all. None. Top end only. Bad cavitation. But if you're running something like a 1118, which is impossible really, I've gone to 1119 with an 85 millimeter nozzle, and that's equivalent to a 1324, and same nozzle, 85 millimeter, and I'm getting better results with this, like 1119. But in saying that, this one, it has a bit more takeoff and a bit more mid, but it doesn't have the top end. And it restricts RPM because it's compressing more, the 1224. If it was a 1324, it wouldn't compress as much because you're losing the compressing side. Anyway, I hope this hasn't confused you in any way, but I'll try to keep things basic and just give an example. So the 1115, the 1318 needs a 85 millimeter nozzle, in my belief, but if you're not pushing the power, you'd have to run 87. They recommend 87. Whoever supplies these props, I forget who did, I'll remember in a minute. R&D, I'm pretty sure. But back in the early days, and people, what the heck's a 1318 or whatever? How come it's running alright? Because it slips more. These compress like crazy. If you want to go really fast top end, and you can run like an 1116 or whatever, great. But if you can't, go to a 1216 and play with that a bit. That will be a faster mid-range, but you'll lose the top end, only by about 1 kilometer an hour. But the mid-range is a lot better on a 1216. Even a 12, 15, if you haven't got the power, round about there. You got to play with it a bit. But in nozzle size, 11s, when you're talking 11s, 87mm, unless you're running really serious power. And back to here, 85mm, because you're losing it. The water is coming back. This one is compressing. So that's a big difference. I hope it helps.